All right, well, good morning, everyone. So welcome to WestGrid's webinar. Today, we have Megan Meredith Lobey from University of British Columbia, and Megan is also part of the Compute Canada larger support team. Megan holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge in medieval archaeology. And since then, Megan worked at Oxford University, University of Alberta, and Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And Megan has large experience working with various GIS, so Geographic Information System tools and humanities databases. And since 2015, Megan has been a digital humanities and social sciences research specialist with the ARC, Advanced Research Computing Group at the University of British Columbia. And Megan, as I mentioned, is also a member of the larger Compute Canada technical team. And today, Megan will talk about what you can do with the tools available to DH scholars in Canada. And on that note, I will pass the microphone to Megan.
Thank you very much, Alex. Can everyone hear me okay? Sounds good? Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for battling through 15 months of Zoom fatigue to come listen this morning, and I'm delighted to be here with you. As Alex said, my name is Megan. I'm Humanities and Social Sciences Specialist for UBC Advanced Research Computing. I've been working with DH researchers for about 13 years, but like some of you, I was never actually trained as a digital humanist. I came to the discipline in sort of a roundabout and accidental sort of a way many years ago. As Alex mentioned, my background is firmly in archaeology, which has been a very digitally enabled discipline for decades. But it has a very different flavor from DH. I'd never even heard the term digital humanities until I got hired for my first digital humanities role, weirdly. And like many digital humanities researchers, I'll fully admit, I'm not as technically inclined as a computer scientist might be. I know the tools that I need to know for the research I'm interested in. I know those tools very well, and others I really have no idea how to use. But what I have learned over the years of helping digital humanities researchers is that a really good skill for anyone is to know what different tools will allow you to do. So I can point people to a tool and to resources to help them use that tool appropriately, even if I may not be able to use that tool myself, or it may not be something that would ever come into the research that I used to do, dabble in. So it's really what we're going to do today. I'm not going to emphasize the use of any one tool or specific workflow for digital humanities, but I'm going to give you the resources that you need to understand how tools function within digital humanities and what some of those tools are, and really how you go about finding information about what you can use to do your research better. So we've got three goals today, really, that are really going to get you pointed, I hope, in the right direction, pardon me, so that you can better understand what research, DH research is about, how you can get started, and how you can do it better. First, we're going to look at sort of what digital humanities people do, really, so you can get a better understanding of the types of work that they like to partake in. We'll look at some of the tools that support digital humanities work. I'll take a few examples of some major tools and approaches and talk about how they're used in the digital humanities community to support research. And I really hope to give you the information that you need so that you know where to go for help. Where do you go to find out about what tools and methods are going to work for your research, how to find people that will help you to learn those tools, and how you can find appropriate support to really help your specific research goals and outcomes. And in order to do this deep dive, we're going to talk lots about where you can go to find resources, information, training, advice, shoulders to cry on if you need. And the slides are going to be available for you after the talk. And they have a lot of links and pointers to a whole range of training opportunities that are available to humanists. So I really like to start out any and all presentations and discussions that I have with anyone interested in digital humanities in any way. I like to start out with this question: what do you want to know? I really want you to think about that. What do you want to know? What is your research question? What knowledge are you really trying to create for the world? What problems are you trying to solve? What are your research questions? And this may seem like a pretty elementary exercise for researchers, but it's critical that before you start out learning new digital tools and methods that incorporate into your research, you really want to know whether or not they're necessary or even desirable to find out what you really know. Because essentially, computers are really, really, really stupid at the end of the day. They're machines which can be taught to do really sophisticated things and to answer questions that may take a lifetime for a human to answer. But in order to answer these questions, you, the human, really need to ask those questions in the right way. You have to teach a computer how to help you by only asking it the kinds of questions that it can answer and talking to it in the kind of language that it understands. So the first step to any digital humanities work, before we get to the tools, before you get to methods or anything like that, is to do your research on some basics of computational thinking. And perhaps you've all done that, and that's awesome. But think through what is perhaps a typical research question in your field, in the discipline of humanities that you're in. And then do some work on how you can ask that question in such a way that a computer can help you answer it. And if you find that you're asking different types of questions to accommodate the way your computer or a particular platform or tool or method works, then that's okay, provided that's what your aim was. But saying you want to throw some DH at your research and see what sticks might not be the best approach. So really what I want to emphasize through all this is I want you to think about not starting with the technology and the tools, but starting with the research and then letting the tools support that so that you answer the questions you want to answer, you solve the problems you want to solve, and the technology helps you rather than leads you. Really quickly, what is digital humanities research, in case anyone here is not all that familiar with what actually is. I'm not going to go too deeply into it because whole careers have been forged out of trying to decide what digital humanities is. And whole other careers have been forged by disagreeing with the first person on what it is. So suffice to say, it's a really broad approach that encompasses a great deal of tools, techniques, approaches, disciplines that usually span over half of a normal campus. And there are two definitions that I have here. One is mine, and it's quite wordy because as a non-digital humanist working in digital humanities, I've always kind of needed to step back and remind myself of what the digital humanities does. So the way I think about it is research that utilizes computational tools, techniques, and methodologies to explore people, their interactions, their history, their cultural practices, and all the other things that make us human. Not the things you can measure through a genome, for instance, but those other things. And a former colleague of mine, an Oxford professor of computer science, just calls it digital beyond the hard sciences, which is very elegant. So digital humanities can be a lot of things. It can be what you want it to be. But again, let's start with the research. So cool, but what does this actually mean in the real world? There's an excellent site that I would recommend everyone interested in DH go visit, and it's called the Project Management for DH site through Emory University. Center for Digital Scholarship. And it has a brilliantly succinct 4 types of activities that DH people tend to do. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but it does hit on some major themes of activity. The things producing, so building a digital exhibit, text encoding, creating new data, producing new outcomes and new research products, new digital research projects. So the other activity, discovery, so digitizing materials that weren't previously in digital form, making new materials available, that perhaps digitizing something in a rare book collection, or collections of photographs or letters, something like that. Analyzing, so this would be that sort of text mining, network analysis to find connections between different elements within a particular text, for instance. Spatial analysis, so this is GIS, looking at spatial relationships between different elements within, say, an archaeological landscape, or actually looking at what the relationship are between spatial elements within a novel. If an author talks about different places, how do they relate to different aspects of the book? And then preserving, so archiving data, preserving the digital data in repositories or archives, that sort of thing. So this is a very simplistic just overview of the types of activities that DH folks get up to. So moving on quickly, a funny question that I get asked a lot of times by non-humanists in workshops sometimes, mostly sort of data related workshops, is whether humanities scholars really have data. And it's an odd question, but it's been asked to me a few times, and I usually huff and puff and say, oh yes, we very well do. But I realized that the types of data that digital humanists work with might look a bit different to somebody who sort of lives and dies by spreadsheets, for instance. So understanding what types of data we're talking about when we're talking about digital humanities data is an interesting point as well. So I have some examples here, which sort of very nicely, I think, demonstrate the difficulty and the beauty of working with digital humanities data. So, for instance, you have texts as well, a physical book that has been digitized, and you have the images of, for instance, up here, you have the image of the pages of the book, and then perhaps you have some markups, some XML markup of that text. You have perhaps a file of a translation of that text. It's sort of multi-layered types of information. From my own world, this center image here is of an archaeological site. It's a church with a burial ground and other various buildings around it. And the types of data that you have just in this one picture. So you have the image itself, which was created in Adobe Illustrator as a visualization of a site. And below that, you have ArcGIS shape files that were created. Everything is geolocated within a map of Scotland, for instance. So you can hover over any particular part of the image to see exactly where you are in space. And that file, that shape file, and the underlying points, essentially points in space, were created using surveying equipment. So you have the survey data, the points on a map that were created through surveying the site within a GIS file that, again, had additional data layered on top of it. And then in order to tell a story with the map, then on top of that GIS file, there's some more artistic interpretations of the site using in this case Adobe Illustrator. So it's very layered data that takes on many different forms. You have images, you have a database of geo-encoded points in space, and you have shape files, and it's lots of different layers. Similarly with the stone monument you see here, this is the Aberlemno stone. It's a mid-first millennium monument created by a culture called the Picts that were in northeastern Scotland, eastern Scotland at the time, and they carved these amazing large stones with pictographic images that are really quite unique. And so with this particular image here, you have the stone itself, the physical stone itself, and the landscape that has geographic information associated with it. You have the image that was taken. This stone has also undergone photogrammetry, where a series of photographs have been taken in order to create a 3D model that has been analyzed. You also have connections. You can also do connections between the style of imagery on this stone compared to other stones in Scotland. So really the point I'm trying to make is that the data for digital humanities tends to be very heterogeneous. It's not necessarily all very big data. So we may not be talking about terabytes and terabytes of data. It may be smaller, but richer and deeper and more layered. And sometimes that makes it a lot more complex to work with. I hope the sound is better for everyone as well now.
Yeah, it is absolutely perfect.
Great.
Now that you've put your left earpiece back on, it's totally great.
Sorry, it's a bad habit taking one out. And so now you have a vague understanding of what digital humanities might be, more or less, and I know the kinds of activities the DH people might get up to in their offices, and you understand a bit more about what data looks like in the digital humanities. Now we can get stuck in a bit. Well, first of all, DH research, like any research, is organized within what is simplistically called the research life cycle. My version here is just to illustrate the different steps that you may be taking as your research or DH research project goes along from beginning to end and back again. And I'll follow along with this more or less for the rest of the talk, although the emphasis is going to be on analyzing and collecting, where we bring in more information about tools. I'm happy to point people as well towards more resources on planning, on project management for DH, on research data management, deposition, making your data fair, so to speak. I'm happy to direct people towards more research resources on those lines as well. Although this is a lovely simplified version, I think everyone here who's done any research knows that the real life picture tends to be a lot messier, with much more sort of iterative, with that arrow not just going in a nice circle, but going in all sorts of different ways. But this is a good way of sort of contextualizing the steps that I'm really going to talk about within the larger framework. So I'm not going to go too much into planning of a project, although it's probably one of the most important aspects of doing DH research, because it's where you really want to do all your research into those tools and methods that I'm going to be talking about later on, and where you want to start formulating those research questions. So you can make sure think about the outputs you want, how you want to contribute to new knowledge. And you really want to be thinking about, well, all the things on this slide, of course, are terribly important. But the one thing I really want to bring out is a consultation with experts. And that's where, if you think you want to do some DH, you want to incorporate some digital technologies, go talk to people who've done similar things, find a community of practice. Because they can be very helpful in guiding you towards good resources, bad resources, unhelpful resources, etc. So I'm going to move on to the training bit, and I really struggled with where to put this slide because it could go in a number of different places, and it's really, I think training is really key to being able to use new tools and methods effectively in your research, because you want these new techniques and approaches, you want them to contribute to your work rather than being a giant time waste, which can happen. You don't want to spend forever learning how to use one specific tool only to find out it really doesn't do what you need, or that you could have done the same work much quicker, or that there was something that would have done the job in less amount of time, etc. So getting some general training on a broad range of things, I think is really critical. It's how I approach a lot of things, is just trying to find out, just simply learn a bit more about the tools that you might want to use, so that you understand what the tools do. Which tools will do this for you? Which tools will do that for you? And then once you've kind of learned a little bit about it, then you can get some more targeted training on specific tools. And the benefit of that is that when you go to consult with people and to ask questions, you can ask questions more effectively because you're a bit more familiar about what the tool does. So some of the top, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these, the best places to go figure out what tools DH people are using and how they're using them and how you can learn how to use them. So Programming Historian is by far my favorite. It's online, it's free, self-directed. It's very DH specific, and there's a lot in there, from collecting your data, analyzing, all the way through to data management. All the tools you can imagine are all in there, and I bring it up quite frequently throughout this talk because it's a treasure trove. Software carpentry as well. I know Alex does a lot of work in giving these software carpentry workshops, which are sort of beginner, get you going, learn the basics of sort of command line and Git and a bit of Python. And they really help you start thinking computationally. These can be at your institution when we're all back at some point, online. You can go to their website and go through some of the modules just on your own as well. Digital Humanities Summer Institute at UVic is a lot more of a commitment, but you'll definitely come away knowing things. The same with the DH at Oxford Summer School, which is excellent and has some different types of content than you might get in Canada in terms of what they teach. It's online this year and registration is open. Depending on where you are in Canada, the time change can be a little bit gnarly. I attended last summer and I'm sat in Vancouver, so it was a bit grim. But the content and the training courses are very, very interesting. And then more of these types of courses through WestGrid and the Compute Canada Federation, which did host a training series in February of this year, and we're likely to do it again next year with more targeted training on specific tools and specific topics within digital humanities that you might be interested in. So you've got a project all planned out, you've been exploring training options, you kind of know what tools you think you might use to help you answer your research questions. And we'll look more closely at some of those in a moment. But now I want to point you to some resources for finding some data. You may we talked earlier about what DH data looks like and what it looks like in a few different contexts. And whatever kind of whatever data looks like in your particular field of research, there are likely other sources out there that you can use. I am very fond of a platform called Canmore, which is sort of an archaeological and historical data repository for Scotland, which links in very nicely with their Ordnance Survey, mapping digital data so you can really have an awful lot of work sort of handed to you on a plate. Scotland is the best place for lazy archaeologists, I promise. And so every discipline will have its own places where you can perhaps find digital data that's already out there. Of course, you'll be creating your own, as well as perhaps using data that that other colleagues are using or working on that. So the best place, I think, for finding humanities data and learning about other sources for it is the oldest research infrastructure in the world, which is the library. Your librarians, data librarians, digital humanities librarians, digital scholarship librarians are amazing people who know probably everything you'll want to know. Libraries are usually where the data repositories and digital collections of textual and photographic materials will live in your institution. There's also something like some online resources, which I'll talk a little bit more later, some digital book repositories. And often with a lot of these repositories and collections, you can use some web scraping tools in order to collect data from them. But always, 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 before you grab data off the web, make sure that you're allowed to. So checking copyrights, making sure that you're allowed to use that content in the way that you want to use that content. Checking with the websites to make sure that you can actually scrape content without running into problems. And with any copyright questions, I really emphasize talking to probably your copyright librarian. Most libraries have someone who can help you with navigating that copyright issue to make sure that you can use the data that you're trying to collect. Some additional links and pointers to data sources that might be helpful. You've got, for those of you doing textual research, there's QUIRC, which is the Canadian Writing Research Collaboratory. This has been going for quite a few years, and I helped work on the original grant for this 13 years ago. So it's definitely a very, very well established resource, and I'm quoting from their website here. Development, management, use, revision, enhancement, and publication of scholarly content. And they have content and materials relating to writing in Canada that you can access. Project Gutenberg, digital library, lots of books that you can use to grab text. How to Trust is quite similar. That is something you can access through institutional license, and it again has a lot of content there. The Federated Research Data Repository, that's something through associated with Compute Canada. We call it FERDR, and there are a number of data sets in there as well. I haven't gone through FERDR in any detail lately, so I'm not sure how much of it is directly useful in a humanities context, but it is basically a data repository, a digital repository. And if you need more specific help on where to find data and repositories, again, talking to your librarians is a great way to start those conversations. So, okay, off to the main show, finding the right tools. How do you find the right tools that you can use to support your research and allow you to do exciting and amazing new things? So before I get too much into some specific tools, I want to give you the tools that you need in order to find more tools. That gets a little confusing. How do you know what exists? How do you know what tools there are? What are people in DH actually actually using. And this can sometimes be a very tricky first step to people who might be new to digital humanities. You may have heard of someone doing some cool work in DH, or you've seen a really neat visualization, and you really think, well, how did they do this? What did they use to do this? What kind of tools can I use? So this was another place where I wasn't sure if I should put training or not, but anyway, when you find so we'll start with a few places. Sorry. So one place that I always like to go are LibGuides. These are sort of databases, information, web pages hosted by libraries all over the board. And if you Google, because Google is still your friend here, Googling DH LibGuide, it'll come up with a huge number of LibGuides at different libraries that will have resources and tools for digital humanists, lists of tools, lists of methods, lists of projects and people that will let you kind of get a better picture of what the range of activity is, and help you find people who are doing similar stuff to what you want to do. And this is really key, and one of the beauties of the digital humanities community is that it is very friendly and collaborative, and because it's by nature a very interdisciplinary sort of field, that the tools training that you need to do a full DH project doesn't often reside in just one person. So they're very big projects. And so it's a great way to find new colleagues and to find out about new projects. Visit training websites. Some of the programming historian not only teaches you how to do stuff, but it gives you a wide variety of different tools that can be applied to similar problems. And then there's another old favorite of mine, Tapor, which I'm going to switch sharing momentarily. Let's see. Nope, pardon me. And if you want to know anything about the types of tools that you can use, here we go. So this is Tapor, tapor.ca home. And again, it's a curated collection of research tools for digital humanities, around about over 1,500 of them. And as you move your mouse around these dots, you can see down below that lots of different tools come up. It's a very handy index of different things going on. And here on the side, you can see the different categories. So should be crazy for publishing, if you want some help. Then you can look at the different types of tools available. So what I'm going to cover in the rest of this talk is going to be pretty basic and a bit sad compared to compared to the resources that are available through here. So I do send people here to just have a look through. Not everything will be useful for everybody, but it's a good place to do your research and to learn about some new stuff. And I will go back to this. There we are. But the most important thing that I want to emphasize is that the best tool and the best digital humanities workflow is the tool that helps you answer your research questions. So there are some tools that I suggest, and I imagine Alex would suggest too, that everyone just needs to learn if you're going to do any kind of digital scholarship, and I'll come to those at the end. but beyond what is probably some very essential skills, like the courses that would be offered in software carpentry, the best tool is really the one that is the best for your particular research questions. So now, how do humanists do what they do? Digitally speaking, we spoke earlier about producing, analyzing, digitizing, etc. So below are a few basic D tools, methods, and approaches that we're going to spend the rest of the talk talking about. So we'll look at text and data analysis. Text analysis is really a cornerstone of digital humanities research. GIS and mapping. These are a different form of data analysis and visualization and sharing and exhibition. A lot of these tools sort of meld into one another. And then finally, we'll end with more resources and what I've sort of dubbed a bit of a toolkit of things that things that are very helpful to know to get started. So text and data analysis, and again, this is a very simplified version of a workflow where you get your data and you need to clean it up a bit because it might be very messy. It's as we talked about earlier, very heterogeneous sort of data that you could get in humanities. You want to analyze it, you want to find out some stuff in it, what might you use to do that, and then you want to visualize it somehow. You want to visualize it, you want to share it, and how do you do that? So I have I've just listed some tools here, and these are quite basic. They're not in any particular order. OpenRefine is something you can use to help clean up messy data. OCR, optimal character recognition. If you've digitized a text, you want to make that text searchable. And so you'll want to use some of these types of things. So you can do it through Adobe. It's not great. Something like Abby Fine Reader is top notch, but it will cost you some money. If you have loads and loads and loads of files, you might want to use something more like Tesseract, which is access through command line. Regular expressions with Python. This will help you speed up repetitive tasks when you're cleaning up your data. They sort of let you describe patterns of some sort within your text, like all lines that begin with a capital letter is one example that's brought up a lot. And so if your text has a lot of repetitive errors, you can use this to help sort of sort them and find a place and just generally clean up your data. And then you want to mark that text up so that it can be searchable. So you can use something like XML to really mark that text up to be able to put it into some kind of analysis framework. And then for analysis, and again, I am going through this at a very basic level because I just want to give you a roadmap of where to start looking more deeply into the types of activities that you want to do with your research. Voyant is an amazing text analysis tool, and I'll do a little demo of that in a bit. For a few documents or words, if you have a huge number of documents, hundreds, you might want to do something topic modeling, so you can see what sorts of what sort of topics a text is talking about. So a topic to a computer is sort of a list of words that occur in statistically meaningful ways. So if all of your documents use a particular phrase or particular words over and over again, you might be able to get that those documents should be clustered together in somehow. There's some connection. So a good example might be if you've scraped thousands of tweets from a particular time, you can use some topic modeling to look at what the trends might be, what were the big things on people's minds during that particular time period. And then, well, Python is a programming language that I can do many things. And it's a real, again, a kind of a cornerstone to being able to do more sophisticated things with your research. And there's a link here to Python for DH. There are a number of different modules. I'm sure Alex probably knows more than I do about where great tutorials are to teach that. For visualization, and this will sort of siege into the GIS discussion as well. Something like Gephi to visualize, Tableau, which has a bit of a cost to it. ParaView there are a number of different platforms to help you visualize your data. Which one will work the best for your data? Which ones will help you visualize what you want to visualize and the way you want to visualize it, is really what you want to find out in order to use these tools in the most effective way possible. So all of these tools kind of build on one another. So this lovely illustration here is from Veronika Poplawski, who worked with, I think, 350 something papers about environmental humanities. She used Mallet to generate topics, so topic modeling, created an XML file, and then put all that into Gephi to create this visualization. So that workflow from getting the papers, using Mallet to generate the topics, XML, Gephi for visualization, was a great workflow and a great set of tools to produce this type of visualization that worked very well for what she wanted to do. And all those tools are available. Whether they will work for you is really dependent on the specifics of your research. But if you aren't sure, you can reach out to the amazing humanities and social sciences experts with WestGrid and Compute Canada, or someone at your institution. And Alex or I or anyone else on the humanities and social sciences team can help as well in finding someone at your institution who can help out. So here's a nice demonstration of a bit of a sample DH workflow where you can see this process of how the tools might work. And this is typical. It won't work for every DH workflow, and this is from Parthenos, which is an EU project that has a number of excellent training modules for researchers, from everything from DH, project management, all sorts. So I recommend visiting it. So the particular project that they're doing is analyzing papers from Parliament. So you collect this, the digital texts. They're on a website, moving on to a bit of web scraping in order to get the data and then clean it up, structure it, the pre-processing, some natural language processing in order to further clean that up and find out what's going on, organizing it into some sort of tidy database so that it is getting closer and closer to being in a format that you can ask the questions of the computer to help you analyze it rather than cleaning it up. Topic modeling, and then finally a visualization, which helps them to visualize what topics were the parliamentarians talking about. So basically what all this did was take a massive amount of documentation from a website that would take somebody ages and ages and ages to read through, even if they could, and they probably couldn't make the same kind of sense of it, and get the computer to do the thinking for them, so that at the end you have this great visualization of what people in Parliament were talking about. And the second part, moving on, which is sort of my area of most interest, but is also a type of analysis and visualization, is geographic information systems and mapping. And with these, you have, I've pulled out four kind of examples here. The top two are a bit different from the bottom two. And ArcGIS, which is very much a Windows-based industry standard for modeling and doing sort of statistical analysis on spatial data. And QGIS, which is a good open source application that's very, very powerful and has some great tutorials if you're interested in starting with heavy spatial analysis. QGIS is excellent. And these two are really more focused on really, again, statistical analysis of spatial data. Whereas Leaflet and Neatline, which are similar, Leaflet requires a bit more technical expertise. And Neatline is a plugin to Omeka, which I'll talk about a little bit later, allow you to use maps more to tell stories and to support sharing research. So they're all mapping, but they perhaps have different, a different emphasis. There's also story maps, which is through ARC, Esri is the company as well. So just as an example, with QGIS and ArcGIS, again, these are the really heavy spatial analysis. You have a cemetery, you have elevations, you have burials marked out very, very clearly. It's something that is not really telling a story so much as giving you a picture of a spatial and digitized picture of what was excavated. The same with this 3D model of a, I believe, an Iron Age hill fort, and the different sort of elevations and the different soil types, I believe, that were discovered at the site. And with using any kind of GIS, another good thing to remember is that they will kill a laptop or a computer very quickly. So you need quite powerful computers for these. Whereas Leaflet and Neatline are more something akin to, and I know we're getting close to time here. So I'll show some more examples of Neatline, for instance, is more of a mapping to tell stories with maps and images, and less about heavy, this heavy statistical analysis. So as you can see, we will just click on one to have a quick look at the project. Oh, I've got this one already. Jeddah, Gateway to the Hajj. This is a very nice project that uses a base map to create more of an interactive exhibit. And here's where we get to sort of the end of this process, where we're really, we've done the work of analyzing, collecting, et cetera. And now we're really sharing that. So if we want to look at what's going on with medieval Jeddah, you come in and there's going to be some spatial information on the maps of, I believe, boundaries of the city and where particular monuments and places were. And then you also have the corresponding text. So you're really supporting this spatial analysis with some interpretation and text as well. And that brings us neatly back to, I'm getting quicker, digital exhibitions and publishing. So this is how you can highlight the work you're doing, and also creating a digital exhibit is part of the activities of DH Scholars. So you have a number of different platforms for doing this, a lot of open source material. Omeka is one that is very, very popular that helps you create digital exhibits. It's free and open source. It has a lot of plugins, like Neatline is actually on the back of Omeka, so that you can marry that spatial data with your exhibit to create really rich, interactive digital exhibits. Jekyll plus GitHub. This is an easy to learn static web page for showcasing your research or blogging, and is a great way of just publishing something to get your research out there. There's not a lot of difficult programming that needs to be done for these. And there's also something that Collective Access is another good digital exhibition platform that you could use for really showcasing your research. Finally, since we're getting very close to being done here, what do I need to know? So this is a non-exhaustive toolkit of the skills that you want to learn or understand to get a good first start at DH. So as I mentioned before, computational thinking, thinking through how to structure your research questions in a good way so that the technology can help support them and help you answer them without leading you astray, so to speak. And I have resources here of articles and posts and such where you can learn this. Command line, this is something that I think everyone should learn, how to face that black box. And the thing about command line and learning the command line that I really want to emphasize is that not only does it allow you to do things like use Python and R and those kinds of things, but it also learns you how to talk to your computer. It gives you a deeper understanding of how these machines work, how they communicate, how to communicate with them, how they are structured. And I think in the process of learning that, you learn a lot more about how best to utilize these resources. Getting GitHub for keeping your work in one place, being able to share it, being able to collaborate. Python, as I said earlier, is a key tool that will allow you to do so many things. GIS and mapping. I have a link here to QGIS, which again has incredible tutorials. They're very easy to follow. And one of those LibGuides I was talking about from Duke University that has a whole lot more resources for different types of mapping platforms that you can use. Digital storytelling, publishing exhibitions. There are loads. And that's the great thing about digital humanities is that there's no end to the resources that are out there. And again, finding out which ones to use is the trick. And finally, data cleanup and data management, which I get are two completely different things, but I've sort of tucked them in at the bottom here. The data management planning tool, thinking through how you're going to manage your data throughout this project. And although that is a lecture all on its own, it's good to keep in mind that it really can, it really should drive how you're structuring your projects. And then just a link again to OpenRefine for helping with data cleanup. And finally, thank you so much for all Zooming once again after so many long months. And it has been a delight to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Are there any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask via audio, or you can type a question into the chat.
And I'm very happy if you want to reach out to me after as well. I'd be delighted to talk to anybody about any specific things that you may have heard or any follow-up questions as well.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I just wanted to thank you. I think it was well formatted, and I already contacted you. I hope I can talk
Excellent.
to you soon.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was really great.
Excellent. Yes, I'm delighted to. When I get my email back going, I'll get in touch ASAP.
All right.
Excellent.
I just want to mention that we have QGIS actually installed on Compute Canada clusters. So if you need to do some intensive QGIS processing, especially via the command line, you can launch it on one of the Compute Canada clusters, and we have essentially unlimited computational resources there.
Yes, I completely forgot about that. Yeah. I spent a large portion of my PhD staring at a frozen desktop, waiting for it to render something, and it never did.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, we didn't have access to any of that back then. It was just sit and wait. And it never worked.
Alex, I have a quick question for you regarding QGIS.
Sure. Yeah.
As a user, am I allowed to install the plugins on QGIS, or should I ask you as the system administrator to do that for me?
So that I don't know, because I'm not a digital humanist, so I've never used QGIS myself, just played with it. Basically, you will probably, we'll have a documentation page for QGIS in Compute Canada, so I can, just give me a second, I can paste a link. And if it mentions plugins, then you have your answer. If not, then you can always send an email. Just give me a second. So here's the link to the QGIS page. So look for it for plugins if it mentions whether you can install yourself. And if not, then you can send an email to support@computecanada.ca. Just a second, support@computecanada.ca. So I just put it in the chat, and somebody will answer you. So unfortunately, I just don't know the answer myself right now.
Yeah,
Okay,
I've
you
never
very much.
used it on the cluster either, just on my own.